This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. On January 18th, Wikipedia, the online encyclopedia, blacked out its English language website for 24 hours. The move was part of an organized protest against a proposed United States law to fight illegal copying of intellectual property on the Internet. Jay Walsh is head of communications for the Wikimedia Foundation, which operates Wikipedia. He says the legislation is detrimental to the free and open web. It's detrimental to Wikipedia, and we want to make sure that we send a message. The blogging site Boing Boing and social news website Reddit also went black. Eric Martin, the general manager of Reddit, said, "This is a really big deal, and this is something we're going to fight, and this is something we think threatens the entire tech sector." Both Wikipedia and Reddit urged users to contact their congressional representative. Internet search leader Google also protested, although it continued to provide service. The protest was against two bills, the Stop Online Piracy Act, or SOPA, and the Protect Intellectual Property Act, or PIPA. PIPA is the Senate version. SOPA is the version in the House of Representatives. Supporters say the law is needed to fight foreign websites that sell pirated copies of American movies and music. Stephen Tepp is a lawyer with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He says piracy of books, music, movies, and other forms of intellectual property hurt the economy. These rogue sites are hurting American jobs, stealing American jobs, they're harming American consumers, and they have no business being on the Internet. But many online businesses, including blogs, news sites, and search engines, say the law would force them to become censors. David Smith is with the Potomac Institute for Policy Studies. He says the proposed law would hurt Wikipedia and other sites that depend on material from users of the sites. He says websites would be required to police all the material they carry. It creates a legal situation in which a complainant can go before a judge and get an order, and it then makes the various internet companies, the internet service providers, responsible for what they're carrying. After the online protests, some lawmakers said they now had doubts about the legislation. The bills appeared unlikely to pass without changes. The Obama administration said it opposes any law that reduces freedom of expression or increases cybersecurity risk. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Laws in the United States and other countries treat a corporation like a person. We talked last week about how this idea developed a long time ago. In the United States, the Constitution protects freedom of speech. The Supreme Court has recognized that this is also true for corporations. But there was still a question about whether corporations could have the same freedom of political speech as real people do. During the 2008 presidential campaign, a nonprofit corporation released a film critical of Hillary Clinton. The group, Citizens United, wanted to make Hillary the Movie available on cable TV, but it did not want to violate a limit on so-called electioneering communication by corporations and unions within 30 days of a primary election. Citizens United took the Federal Election Commission to court to fight the law. In January of this year, the Supreme Court, by the narrowest majority, voted 5-4 to end the ban. The ruling clears the way for corporations and unions to use their own money to support the election or defeat of a candidate. However, they are still barred from directly giving money to candidates. And the court did not consider the question of laws designed to prevent foreign influence in the political process. Since the 1940s, the traditional place for political speech by American unions and companies has been through political action committees. William Van Alstyne is a professor at the William and Mary Law School in Virginia. He says, if the shareholder felt it to their interest, if they wanted to contribute to a political action committee representing the business interest of the company, then they would contribute to the political action committee. Same thing on the labor side. So members of the union might be encouraged to contribute to the PAC. The PAC would then determine how best to use the money, politically speaking, in campaigns for and against candidates, ballot issues, and all the rest. Now, says Professor Van Alstyne, the decision in Citizens United raises new issues. For example, the court will have to rule on whether companies with majority foreign ownership can enjoy the same expanded rights of political speech. President Obama denounced the ruling in his State of the Union speech to Congress in January. In March, Chief Justice John Roberts told law students that anybody can criticize the Supreme Court, but in answer to a question, he said the setting was very troubling. 6 of the 9 justices, including the Chief Justice, were sitting right in front of the President. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report. For more business news, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. There has been a lot of talk about the debt ceiling in the United States. The debt ceiling is a legal limit on how much the federal government can borrow. Political disputes over that amount have concerned investors in recent weeks. American lawmakers must negotiate a new debt ceiling every time the federal debt reaches that legal limit. National debt grows when a government spends more money than it has available. Governments offer bonds and other investments to raise money to pay for this spending. In return, the government promises to repay with interest the investors who buy these securities. The financial demands of World War I led American lawmakers to establish a total debt limit. In 1917, Congress agreed that the president could borrow up to a set amount without seeking approval. Congress has agreed to change the debt limit 10 times since 2001. But the major parties may disagree on spending levels or on the need to borrow to pay for government operations. other nations buy United States Treasury securities because they are considered the safest investment in the world. The partial shutdown of the federal government led to worldwide concern about the safety of these investments. Congress agreed to reopen the government without enforcing the debt ceiling, only one day before borrowing reached the legal limit. Lawmakers agreed to let the president decide what the Treasury Department could borrow through February 7th. Congress must now negotiate a new debt limit and resolve other budgetary issues in order to avoid another crisis. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Persutti.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. There is a place where Christmas lives all year long. It is called Bronner's Christmas Wonderland in Frankenmuth, Michigan. The family-owned business calls itself the world's largest Christmas store. The late Wayne Bronner started the business in 1945. Wayne Bronner, Wally's son, is president and chief executive of what is now a multi-million-dollar corporation. He learned the business from an early age. Some of his best memories are traveling to other countries with his father to find new products for the store. Bronner's sells more than 50,000 holiday products from 70 nations. Half of the products cost less than $10. Wayne Bronner says demand for small objects to hang on Christmas trees has expanded over the years. People put more time, effort, and money into decorating their homes with these ornaments, lights, and religious scenes. Bronner's is famous for its nativity scenes, which show the birth of Jesus Christ. Michigan has the nation's highest unemployment rate. Bronner's has been affected by the recession too, but not in reduced sales, Wayne Bronner says. Even though people are spending less, we're having more people visit here. And as a result, we've actually had a sales increase. Bronner's success is also linked to community cooperation and investment. Frankenmuth is a town of 5,000 people in eastern Michigan's farm country. The town was settled by Bavarians in the 1800s. It has kept its traditions alive in buildings and restaurants. Bavarian cultural themes and Bronner's huge store bring 3 million visitors a year. The town is the most popular place for tourists in the state. Bronner's business is aimed at a single day of the year. But that is not too different from other businesses. Wayne Bronner says about half of our business is done in the last quarter of the year, in the last 3 months. And actually, when you contrast that with most retailers, that follows the same pattern. Wayne Bronner says the family's long-term planning and willingness to reinvest profits has grown the company into what it is today. Still, it does not hurt to build a business on a holiday celebrated worldwide. Currently, about 2% of sales are overseas. But Wayne Bronner sees room for growth, especially through the internet. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. On May 18th, Dominique Strauss-Kahn resigned as Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. Mr. Strauss-Kahn was charged with a sexual attack on a cleaning woman at a New York hotel. He said in a resignation letter that he denies the charges with the greatest possible firmness. His fall has especially shocked Europe. The IMF is currently playing a major part in rescue loans to Greece, Ireland, and Portugal. European nations have increasingly depended on the fund to help them in their recent struggles with debt. The IMF and the World Bank grew out of an international conference held in the United States in 1944. They were created as ways to support economic cooperation and development. Both are based in Washington. The World Bank has traditionally been led by an American, and the IMF by a European. But fast-growing economies in the developing world say it's time for a change. Officials from Brazil, China, and India say Mr. Strauss-Kahn's replacement should come from outside Europe. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, leader of Europe's biggest economy, disagreed. She said, "In the present situation, when we have significant problems with the euro, and the IMF is very much involved there, there should be a European candidate with support from the international community." The main job of the IMF is to help make sure payments flow smoothly between nations. Sometimes this means providing loans so governments can meet debt payments. The money it lends comes mostly from quotas, financial promises made by its members. 187 nations belong to the IMF. The lender currently has about $250 billion in approved loans. Most have not yet been used or drawn down. What effect the resignation of Dominique Strauss-Kahn will have is unclear. He was praised as a skillful negotiator in dealing with Europe and the global financial crisis. But Stephanie Ricard at the London School of Economics says IMF staff members do the actual negotiation of loan conditions. And they're going to continue to do their job. Dominique Strauss-Kahn became managing director in 2007. The Frenchman, widely known as DSK, is a member of France's Socialist Party. Before his arrest, he was considered a leading candidate for France's presidential election next year. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. In the American legal system, people generally bring civil claims as individuals. But if a lot of people have similar claims, they may try to bring a class action lawsuit. Cornell University law professor Michael Dorf says a class action allows a large group of people to bring their individual claims together as a group. But groups need permission to bring a class action, and that can be denied. That happened to 1.5 million current and former employees of America's largest private employer. The women accuse Walmart of discriminating against female employees in its stores. But the United States Supreme Court voted to block a huge class action against Walmart in federal court. The women were seeking billions of dollars. They say men were given more pay and more chances to move up in the company. They accuse Walmart of violating part of a federal law, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The case started about 10 years ago. A federal district court in California agreed that the case could go forward as a class action. Walmart again lost in a federal appeals court. But on June 20th, Walmart won its appeal in the nation's highest court. Professor Dorff, who was not involved in the case, says the justices disagreed about whether there was a common question. He says most of the justices found that Walmart was not being accused of one kind of discrimination or one policy, but many different acts. The key to being able to bring a class action here, and the issue that divided our Supreme Court, was whether all of these different claims by over 1 million people had enough in common to justify a single class action. Walmart has a policy barring discrimination, but the women accused the company of unfair policies and permitting bad behavior by some store managers. The court was divided 5-4 in its ruling. Yet all 9 justices agreed that the case could not go forward. The women needed to meet additional legal requirements because they were seeking payment for harm they say was done. All the justices agreed these requirements had not been met. Boston University law professor Michael Harper says the decision was widely expected. He says the class action failed because it did not target a single action or policy by Walmart. But the ruling does not bar the women from bringing individual cases. They can also seek class actions at the state level. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Health Report. Wisdom teeth are normally the last teeth to appear. This usually happens when people are in their late teen years or early 20s. In other words, when they are older and wiser. Wisdom teeth are molars, or chewing teeth, at the back of the mouth. The third set of molars, if you have them, are your wisdom teeth. They can grow into place normally and never cause a problem, but often there is not enough room for them in the mouth. They might crowd other teeth. Sometimes they even push sideways through the gums. An impacted wisdom tooth is one that fails to completely rise through the gums. The term is erupt. Wisdom teeth that only partially erupt can leave space for bacteria to enter around the tooth. Infection is a risk in these cases. Wisdom teeth that are not well aligned and become impacted are often removed. People should have the placement of their wisdom teeth examined between the ages of 16 and 20. X-rays can show wisdom teeth that are below the gums. The American Dental Association says removal is generally advised when wisdom teeth only partly break through the gums. Removal is also advised if there is a chance that poorly aligned wisdom teeth will damage other teeth. And removal is called for in cases where fluid collects around a wisdom tooth that is partly or fully below the gum. But why do we have wisdom teeth if we often need to get them removed? One theory has to do with our diets. Scientists say the diet of prehistoric humans probably required more chewing teeth. Life was probably a little rougher on the teeth back then, too. So it was good to have extras. The removal of wisdom teeth is performed by oral surgeons. They say if removal is advised, the best time to do it is before the teeth cause any problems or pain. The American Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons says young adults are the best candidates for wisdom teeth removal. The group says older patients may be at greater risk for disease in the tissue surrounding the molars. Patients can have general anesthesia during the operation, or they might choose to have a local painkiller and remain awake. It may depend on the condition of the wisdom teeth and the number to be removed. After surgery, there can be swelling of the gums and face and some pain. Both can be treated with cold wraps and medication. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. They are not even 5 millimeters long and cannot fly or jump. Yet bedbugs strike fear in homeowners and business owners. Well, not all business owners. Some see money in these little bloodsuckers. Missy Henriksen speaks for the National Pest Management Association. She says they are now seeing bedbugs in unusual places: schools and hospitals, stores, and movie theaters. So, as the numbers have grown, those bedbugs are spreading out and traveling along with people. New York and other cities have outbreaks. But the United States is not the only country affected. Jeff White is an insect expert who hosts BedBug TV on the website BedBug Central. He says the lack of public awareness has caused this rapid expansion of bedbug infestations. Mr. White says bedbugs nearly disappeared from the United States for 50 or 60 years. Now, researchers are looking for faster, safer ways to control them without the kinds of poisons used in the past. The name is misleading. Bedbugs do not just live in beds. Mr. White says they can survive for a year without food, that is, blood. In September, an industry event called BedBug University's North American Summit 2010 took place near Chicago, Illinois. More than 360 people attended the two-day meeting. The industry says bedbugs are the most difficult pest to control. Treatments can cost from several $100s to thousands of dollars in a hotel or apartment building. Missy Henriksen says Americans spent almost $260 million on bedbug treatments last year. That was only 5% of total spending on pest control, but that number does not include other costs. She says the total economic effect is much greater. Businesses that have bed bugs often must close to solve the problem. Bed bugs have not been shown to spread disease, but they can leave itchy bite marks and cause allergic reactions in some people. Lately, however, another bug has caught America's attention. The National Pest Management Association is now getting the most questions about stink bugs. Outbreaks have invaded homes and offices in many states. Stink bugs are harmless except to farms and gardens, and they smell bad only if you smash them. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can get transcripts, MP3s, and podcasts of our shows at voaspecialenglish.com. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes at VOA Learning English. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. 1 year ago, President Obama signed the Economic Recovery Bill aimed at pulling the country out of recession. The bill promised jobs, including many in the nuclear energy industry. In February, the president announced plans for the government to guarantee more than $8 billion in loans for 2 new nuclear energy centers in the state of Georgia. The Southern Company plans to build the nuclear power centers. The first would start operations in 2016. Mr. Obama announced the plan at a job training center in Lanham, Maryland. The message was that nuclear energy projects will create jobs. President Obama said, "It is a plant that will create thousands of construction jobs in the next few years and some 800 permanent jobs, well-paying permanent jobs, in the years to come." In February, the Federal Reserve predicted that unemployment will remain near current levels through the year. The present rate is 9.7%. The central bank said unemployment could remain high for the next 2 years. President Obama has received sharp criticism from Republicans over the lack of progress in job creation. The $787 billion American Recovery and Reinvestment Act is also unpopular because of its cost. Critics said the money is being spent too slowly, with less than 60% being spent so far. But the administration said the measure has saved or created 2 million jobs. By supporting nuclear energy, the president may be seeking common ground with Republicans, who have called for building as many as 100 new nuclear power centers. Mr. Obama has linked clean energy with economic growth. He also warned that the United States is falling behind in developing nuclear energy. He said, "There are 56 nuclear reactors under construction in the world, 21 in China alone, 6 in South Korea, and 5 in India." The United States has not built a new nuclear power plant in nearly 30 years. American public opinion about nuclear energy has been mixed. In recent years, public opinion studies show more than half of Americans approve of nuclear energy. About 1/5 of the nation's electricity is generated by nuclear power. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report.
This is the VOA Special English Health Report. Watching the Olympics probably made some people feel a little guilty about not exercising. The truth is, if physical inactivity were a sport, a lot of us could give a gold medal performance. To mark the London Olympics, The Lancet, a British medical journal, published a series of papers about the problem of inactivity. Public health experts say physical inactivity is the world's 4th leading cause of death. They estimate that inactivity plays a major part in 6 to 10% of deaths from non-communicable diseases. These include conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and colon and breast cancer. Ayman Lee at the Harvard School of Public Health worked with a team that studied inactivity. She says the findings are conservative and may even underestimate the problem. She says physical inactivity is harmful to health, as harmful as far as deaths are concerned as smoking. The researchers compared data on physical inactivity with disease rates in 122 countries. Ayman Lee says researchers considered many behaviors in their study that may be associated with increased or decreased risk of disease. She says, for example, we know that if you are active, you probably smoke less. Additionally, we factored out obesity, independent of the fact that active people also tend to weigh less. Harold Cole is with the University of Texas School of Public Health. He also worked on the special report. He says physical inactivity should be recognized as a global epidemic. We have to realize that high-income countries are the most inactive around the world, he says. But low to middle-income countries are not going to be far behind as things change. He says as economies develop, people basically engineer activity out of their daily lives. Harold Cole points to campaigns that continue to reduce smoking and alcohol use. He says the time has come to target physical inactivity as a major threat to public health. He also says it is becoming clearer that our environment plays a big part in whether we exercise or not. Ayman Lee agrees, and she urges people to do moderately intense exercise for 150 minutes a week. Anything you can do is great, she says. Even if you don't reach that 150 minutes a week, a little is better than none, and more is better than a little. She plans to return every 4 years, just like the Olympics, to give a progress report on how the world is doing. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Representatives of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank met in Washington in late April. This was the last time Robert Zoellick attended the spring meetings of the two organizations as the World Bank president. Earlier, Jim Yong Kim was officially chosen as the bank's 12th president. Mr. Zoellick said developing countries are now engines of growth. Developing countries have provided 2/3 of global growth over the past 5 years, he said. But he added that many developing nations still face big problems. He said all members need to work together better for their common interest. The United States traditionally chooses the World Bank head, and Europe chooses the IMF chief. But developing nations want more influence. The World Bank is a development agency. The IMF supports monetary cooperation and provides loans. IMF chief Christine Lagarde announced that the fund had received promises of over $320 billion to help nations in trouble. She also said developing nations need to do more to support their emerging markets. They too have to address some of their issues, she said. They too have to be very attentive to a volatile market situation. And that means for some of these emerging markets, refocusing on their domestic growth. Ms. Lagarde said emerging markets need to work toward growth and building demand. But that requires resources. Two issues are access to banks and safety nets. The World Bank says 3/4 of the poor have no access to banks. That means no savings in their communities to finance growth. The problem is greater for women. Poor women are 28% less likely to have bank accounts than poor men. Social programs are also needed. 60% of the developing world cannot depend on social programs to protect citizens from hunger or to provide services in crises. Mr. Zellick said, to help the poorest, every country needs basic safety nets to deal with crises. Because the other lesson we learned, he said, is if you wait until a crisis, it's too late. And rich nations have a lot to learn from developing ones. Mr. Zellick said programs in Brazil and Mexico are not costly, but help millions. Finally, the World Bank Group welcomed its newest member, South Sudan. The nation received its first grant of $9 million. The money is to help create jobs and provide financial services. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
For VOA Learning English, welcome to Economics in Special English. In January, the World Bank released its Global Economic Prospects Report. World Bank experts are using the words fragile and uncertain to describe the economic recovery this year. Their report predicts the global economy will grow a little over 2% in 2013 and slightly more in the following 2 years. Predictions of limited growth have become familiar since the financial crisis 4 years ago. Wealthy countries are expected to have slower growth than developing ones as they deal with larger amounts of debt and big budget deficits. World Bank President Jim Yong Kim is urging developing countries to become growth drivers. But he notes that it is important to build a foundation for growth that can last over time. He says the developed world needs to help developing countries make gains in health, infrastructure, and education. Andrew Burns was lead author of the report. He says it is not only important to build roads and bridges, but to invest money in health care and effort in government reforms. Some high-growth developing countries, such as China, are spending a lot on public works projects, but spend little on health care. The World Bank president says Europe and America have approved some measures to deal with economic weakness. But financial policy remains a work in progress. Still, wealthy nations remain the biggest markets for exports and providers of foreign investment. Developing countries are positioned for stronger growth, but they will face basic risks. World Bank Chief Kim said he is concerned that low grain supplies could bring high food prices, hurting the poor. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. The American economy improved in 2012, but the rate of growth remained low. America's jobless rate fell to its lowest level in 4 years. Average home prices ended a long period of decline, and money started flowing into financial markets again. But at the year's end, many observers said the economic recovery had not been as strong as they had hoped. Like many other countries, the United States is spending more money than it is receiving. Some countries are spending money they do not have in an effort to get their economies growing again. Yet many experts say spending money you don't have, or deficit spending, has caused global financial problems with debt, especially in Europe. Other economists say the mathematics is not that simple. Desmond Lockman of the American Enterprise Institute says that deep budget cuts in Greece have only produced a deep recession. Some see political inaction as a threat. Financial reform activist Robert Bixby says the biggest problem for the American economy is the country's political system. He says political dysfunction is a bigger threat than economic problems. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke says the country does not have to be this way. Recently, he has urged lawmakers to provide leadership. He has called on lawmakers to cooperate and creatively deliver fiscal clarity, or a clear path to solving the nation's budget problems. On January 1st, Congress agreed on new tax legislation. The measures took the place of larger tax increases and budget cuts that were to take effect automatically at the beginning of this year. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal. I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Health Report. Delegates from around the world met in Uruguay in November to consider new ways to control tobacco. A World Health Organization treaty called the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control took effect 5 years ago. More than 170 governments have signed it. The treaty requires a number of efforts, like raising tobacco prices, restricting advertising, and banning sales to children. High school students protested against tobacco companies at a trade show in Jakarta. Indonesia has not signed the international treaty, but its health ministry proposes to ban all forms of cigarette advertising. An official at the Indonesian Tobacco Alliance says his trade group agrees with banning all activities to promote cigarettes to the young. But he says tobacco companies should be able to market their products to adults, just like any other legal product. Tobacco growers are also concerned about several measures proposed at the meeting in Uruguay. One would ban additives traditionally used with burley tobacco. This kind of tobacco is grown extensively in Africa. It is used extensively in American-style cigarettes that are popular worldwide. Anti-smoking groups say the proposal is aimed against flavorings like chocolate, licorice, and sugar. The director of the Tanzania Tobacco Control Forum points out that several American brands still use burley tobacco, but without additives. But economists at NKC, a South African research group, say the guidelines would affect the lives of millions of Africans who depend on tobacco farming. The report says nearly 4 million people in Mozambique, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe would be most seriously affected. Since June, the United States has banned cigarette companies from using misleading terms like light, mild, and low tar. Also in November, federal health officials announced new actions to control tobacco. These include proposals to require larger health warnings on cigarette packages and advertisements. Officials also want to require new graphic health warnings within 2 years. Proposals include a picture of a woman blowing smoke in a baby's face and an image of diseased lungs next to healthy lungs. You can find a link to all of the proposed images at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Health Report. Imagine this situation. You pass a group of people. The people are talking to each other. You cannot hear what they are saying, but suddenly they start laughing. What would you think? Would you think they were laughing at something funny that one of them said? Or, be honest with yourself, would you think they were laughing at you? Yes, you. Being laughed at is a common fear, but a major study published in 2009 found that this fear is not the same around the world. It differs from culture to culture. People in Finland were the least likely to believe that people laughing in their presence were making fun of them. Less than 10% of Finns in the study said they would think that way, compared to 80% of people in Thailand. Some people in the study said they felt unsure of themselves in social situations, but hid their feelings of insecurity. Others said they avoided social situations where they had been laughed at before. The study found that people in Turkmenistan and Cambodia were more likely to be in the first group. They would hide their feelings of insecurity if they were around other people's laughter. But people in Iraq, Egypt, and Jordan were more likely to try to avoid such situations if they felt they had been laughed at before. Shy people often avoid situations that would force them into close contact with other people. They worry that something they say or do will make other people laugh at them. But some people worry much more than others. They may have a disorder called galatophobia. Gelos is a Greek word. It means laughter. Phobia means fear. This fear of laughter can be truly sad for those who live with it. It can affect how they lead their lives. In the study, a team from the University of Zurich led more than 90 researchers from around the world. They wanted to understand the difference between normal shyness and true galatophobia. Another purpose of the study was to compare the levels of fear of being laughed at in different cultures. The researchers surveyed more than 22,000 people in 42 different languages. The findings appeared in the scientific journal Humor. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. Is shyness a serious problem for you or someone you know? It was for a university student who asked people in our audience for advice on how to deal with it. You can find out what they said at voaspecialenglish.com.